If you are joining us today on the Simplified Summary YouTube channel, welcome. And real quick, before we get into it, if you enjoy this kind of deep dive, please do hit that subscribe button and, share this with anyone who loves a good, intense, philosophical unpacking. Because today we have something really unusual.
Very unusual. Honestly, when I first looked at the prep notes, I thought it was a typo.
Right. I mean, we are looking at exactly 31 words today. Just 31 words from the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, Volume 1, specifically from his writings on Karma Yoga. And that is the entirety of our source material for this deep dive. 31 words.
Yeah, I thought there had been some kind of formatting error, like the rest of the document just got cut off somehow.
Same here. But, reading it over and then reading it again, it becomes immediately apparent that this tiny fragment operates with the density of, like, a collapsed star.
That's a great way to put it. It's microscopic, but the gravitational pull of the ideas inside it is just immense.
Exactly. So our mission today is to unpack this tiny, really cryptic fragment for you, the listener. Because hidden within these few sentences is this profound exploration of human agency, self-deception, the architecture of our internal monologues, and really the fundamental nature of freedom.
It really is a fascinating piece of literature precisely because of its brevity and its internal contradictions.
Yeah. And just so we're all on the same page, the text reads in its entirety, quote, and you tell yourself, quote, I'll go too, unquote. In a few months, you'll go, end quote. And then there are 4 trailing dots, and it continues. You are the soul, the free. Nothing can change freedom, you change the face.
It's just jarring. We are presented with a text that abruptly shifts from the mundane, almost anxious reality of everyday procrastination straight into a sweeping, absolute ontological declaration about the nature of the soul.
Right, the transition gives you whiplash.
Exactly. And that friction is exactly where the meaning lives. We're essentially looking at a phenomenological map of human consciousness, and it's charted across just 4 fragmented thoughts.
4 thoughts. That's it.
Yeah. We begin the murky waters of the ego and self-rationalization, and we end up in the stark, unyielding light of existential permanence.
So let's start right at the beginning. The very first word is a deliberate provocation. It's the word "and." The text doesn't begin, it continues.
Yes. And you tell yourself.
Right. By starting with a conjunction, the author immediately places us in medias res. We are dropping right into the middle of a conversation that has already been happening inside someone's head.
It suggests a pre-existing condition of doubt or some sort of internal debate.
Exactly. It implies that the rationalization we are about to witness is just the latest in a long string of similar thoughts. We haven't caught the beginning of the lie, we've just tuned in for the chorus.
And that structural choice instantly dissolves the boundary between the reader and the text, because consciousness itself is a continuous and.
Oh, that's interesting. What do you mean by that?
Well, think about it. We never experience the genesis of our own thought process. We only ever become aware of our thoughts once they're already in motion.
You never catch the engine starting, you just realize you're driving.
Exactly. So by opening with "and," the text mimics the reality of waking up to your own internal monologue. But more importantly, let's look at the phrase that follows.
You tell yourself.
Yeah, you tell yourself. That establishes an immediate psychological schism.
It does. There is a you who is speaking and a yourself who is being addressed. The text is forcing us to confront the duality of our own minds.
Because when you tell yourself something, who is the author of the statement and who is the audience?
Right. It implies a fracture in the ego. It's a state where the mind has to convince the body, where the ego has to soothe the anxieties of the deeper self.
It's totally a mechanism of self-persuasion. I mean, we don't tell ourselves things that are self-evidently true.
No, of course not. I don't tell myself that gravity exists or that fire is hot. The phrase "you tell yourself" carries this inherent implication of deceit, or at least of fragile hope.
It is absolutely the language of rationalization.
And the specific lie being told here is fascinating. Quote, I'll go too. It's such a simple sentence, but the word "to" carries an enormous amount of unseen narrative weight.
It does. It means a departure has already taken place. Someone else has moved on.
Right. The speaker has been left behind. And this internal promise, "I'll go too," is just a desperate attempt to maintain a connection to whatever or whoever has already departed.
The word "to" reveals the social and really the mimetic nature of the speaker's desire. The motivation for action isn't intrinsic at all. It is reactive.
So they aren't saying, I must go because it is my destiny.
No, they're saying, I will go because others have gone. It highlights this deep-seated fear of stagnation and isolation. But I think the most critical element of that internal quote is the tense, I will.
A projection into the future.
Yes, it is not an assertion of present reality. The commitment to action is immediately softened by the buffer of future tense.
Which is the classic architecture of procrastination.
Totally. By placing the action in the future, the speaker achieves the psychological reward of having made a decision without having to actually endure the friction and risk of taking the action in the present moment.
You get the dopamine hit of planning without the sweat of doing, which flows perfectly into the next sentence, where the architecture of that procrastination is fully built out. The text moves from the internal quote to a direct observation of the timeline. In a few months, you'll go.
The specificity of a few months is brilliant.
It really is. It's the Goldilocks zone of self-deception.
Explain that.
Well, think about it. If you tell yourself you'll do something tomorrow, the deadline is too close. It induces panic. And when tomorrow comes and you fail to act, the failure is undeniable.
Right. The cognitive dissonance is too sharp.
Exactly. But if you tell yourself you'll do it in 10 years, it's too abstract. It provides no immediate comfort. But a few months? That is just far enough away to alleviate present guilt, but close enough to feel like a legitimate, actionable plan.
It is the perfect temporal hiding place.
Mm-hmm.
A few months is a horizon that constantly recedes as you approach it.
It's always a few months away.
Always. And notice the shift in pronouns there. We move from the internal quote, I'll go, to the external, almost omniscient narration of you'll go.
Oh, wow. Yeah. The voice of the text separates from the voice of the ego.
It's as if a higher, more objective awareness is observing the ego's pathetic attempts to comfort itself. And then we encounter the punctuation, the trailing dots.
Those 4 dots trailing off into silence.
Right. In a text this brief, punctuation is practically a character in itself. Those dots represent the bleeding away of resolve.
It's the sound of an intention evaporating into the void of the future.
It marks the exact moment where the self-deception collapses under its own weight. The speaker knows, the narrator knows, and we, the listener, know that the departure in a few months will never actually happen.
It's the graveyard of the unfulfilled promise. It's the trailing off of a sentence the speaker doesn't even have the conviction to finish. It's the physical representation of fading momentum on the page.
And up to this point, the text reads like a sharp, slightly cynical, psychological observation about human inertia.
Right. We're trapped in a cycle of reactive desires with that word, too. We have deferred actions with I'll, and we have comfortable rationalizations with a few months.
We are listening to a mind trapped in the friction of its own temporal existence. But then the text executes a massive, completely disorienting pivot.
We hit the end of those trailing dots, and suddenly the tone shifts from conversational psychology to absolute prophetic declaration. The text states, you are the soul, the free.
The grammatical structure of that sentence is striking, and it really demands our careful attention. It does not say, you have a free soul. It does not say, you are a free soul.
No, it says, you are the soul, the free.
The syntax is almost archaic, placing the definite article before both the noun and the adjective. The soul, the free. This construction elevates the concept of freedom from a mere attribute to an essential defining substance.
Meaning freedom is not a characteristic that the soul possesses.
Exactly. Freedom is the very material from which the soul is constructed. Furthermore, the equation is absolute. You are the soul.
The text just strips away the ego, the procrastinating mind, the internal voice that lies about what it will do in a few months.
It dismisses all of that as secondary or illusory. Your fundamental identity, the text asserts, is synonymous with this indestructible concept of the soul, the free.
It's an ontological shock to the system. The first half of the text diagnoses our localized temporal anxiety, our worry about when we will act, our fear of being left behind. And then the second half of the text attempts to cure that anxiety by zooming out to an infinite scale.
Because if you are the soul, and the soul is inherently, inextricably defined as the free, then the petty negotiations of the ego become entirely irrelevant.
All that bargaining about, I'll go in a few months, just falls away. The text is pulling the rug out from under the initial premise.
It's asking a silent question. Why are you agonizing over the timing of your physical or social movements when your core identity is already existing in a state of absolute, unconditioned freedom?
It reframes the entire preceding internal monologue as a fundamental misunderstanding of the self. The anxiety of "I'll go too" stems from a belief that freedom or fulfillment is located somewhere else.
That is in another physical location or another social context, and that it must be attained through action across time.
But the declaration, "You are the soul, the free," annihilates that premise. If you are the freedom you are seeking, then the movement across space and time is completely unnecessary for your liberation.
The ego believes freedom is a destination. The text asserts that freedom is your point of origin, your constant state. Which brings us to the most radical claim in the entire fragment. Nothing can change freedom.
Now, that is a statement that immediately invites resistance. I mean, when we look at the material world, everything seems to contradict that idea.
Right. Freedom, in the way we commonly use the word, is highly mutable.
It can be legislated away, it can be physically restricted by incarceration, it can be compromised by illness or poverty in our day-to-day lives. Freedom appears to be the most fragile and easily changed condition imaginable.
So, when the text declares nothing can change freedom, it forces us to redefine the word freedom entirely.
It cannot be talking about political, physical, or economic freedom. It has to be pointing to something much deeper.
The text is forcing a distinction between circumstantial agency and ontological freedom. Circumstantial agency, what you are allowed to do, where you are allowed to go, is constantly in flux. It is entirely dependent on external forces.
But the text is speaking of freedom as a primordial state of consciousness.
Exactly. If you are the soul, and the soul is inherently free, then this freedom is an immutable property of existence itself. It is the blank canvas upon which the restrictions of the physical world are painted.
You can paint a prison on the canvas, but the canvas itself remains unchanged by the image.
That is a beautiful way to visualize it. The text is arguing that the fundamental core of human awareness cannot be fundamentally altered by external stimuli.
Nothing can change freedom is a radical assertion of internal sovereignty. It suggests that even the deepest suffering or the most severe restriction only affects the superficial layers of identity, leaving the core untouched.
Which brings us to the final four words. The punchline of this entire existential equation. You change the face.
And there is no period at the end of this sentence, which implies a continuous, never-ending action. You change the face.
If the soul is the immutable canvas, then the face is the constantly shifting paint. But what exactly is the face in this context?
It seems to be the part of us that engages in that opening monologue. The face is the ego, the social mask, the persona that worries about being left behind. It's the entity that makes false promises about what it will do in a few months.
The face is the interface between the immutable soul and the mutable world. It is the mechanism through which we interact with time and society. And the text points out a profound human tragedy here.
The tragedy of you change the face.
Yes. We spend an enormous amount of our energy altering our exterior. We change our minds, we change our locations, we change our rationalizations, we change the masks we wear for different people.
We are constantly engaged in the frenetic activity of rearranging the surface of our lives, hoping that by changing the face, we might somehow affect the core.
But the text establishes a rigid dichotomy. You can change the face infinitely, but nothing can change freedom. The tragedy is that we invest all our existential capital into the mutable face, while entirely ignoring the inherent unchangeable freedom of the soul.
It's a stunning indictment of how we spend our conscious energy. The opening of the text, the "I'll go to," and the "in a few months," that is all the frantic activity of the face.
It is the face trying to arrange the future to avoid discomfort.
And the text just looks at all that nervous energy, sweeps it aside, and says, look at what you actually are. You are the soul. You are the free. Why are you spending all your time painting a new mask when the thing wearing the mask is already infinite?
And as you mentioned, the omission of the period at the end of you change the face leaves the thought hanging, almost as a challenge. It implies that this changing of the face is an endless, exhausting cycle, and we are stuck in it until we realize the truth of the previous sentences.
The lack of terminal punctuation also suggests that the changing of the face is an ongoing reality that we must accept. The text isn't necessarily demanding that we stop changing the face. It might be suggesting that doing so is an unavoidable part of the human condition.
We must interact with the world, and doing so requires a mutable interface. The wisdom of the text lies in recognizing the difference between the two states.
Because the suffering arises when we confuse the face for the soul.
Precisely. When we believe that the restrictions placed upon the face are actually restricting the soul. If you understand that nothing can change freedom, then you can participate in the changing of the face without being destroyed by the inevitable failures and restrictions of the material world.
You can observe your own ego telling itself lies about a few months with a sense of detached amusement rather than existential dread.
Because you know that this internal chatter does not touch the core of your being.
That detachment is the ultimate takeaway from these 31 words. It forces us to ask a difficult question about our own internal lives. When you catch yourself in the middle of a rationalization, when you hear that internal voice say, and you tell yourself, which part of you is listening?
Is it just another layer of the face, nervously monitoring its own expressions?
Or can you shift your perspective back to the soul, the unchangeable observer that watches the mind spin its little fictions about the future? This tiny fragment of text demands that we stop identifying with the turbulence of our own thoughts.
And start identifying with the silence that surrounds them.
It's a profound recalibration of where we locate our identity. So the next time you find yourself deferring an action or making a quiet promise to yourself about what you will do in a few months, take a moment to look past the changing face and try to locate the freedom that remains entirely untouched by your hesitation. And maybe consider this: if the face is always changing and the soul is always free, what happens to the memories you gather along the way? Do they stain the canvas, or are they just another fleeting expression on the mask? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.